Good morning. It's Wednesday, and this is the video for us to continue reading The Island of the Blue Dolphins together. So if you are reading along with me, I am on chapter 5. When we left off yesterday, there had been a real tragedy that had happened. Remember, the Aleuts were leaving, and they were trying to leave without paying the villagers exactly what they owed, and that ended up with a conflict between the people on the boat and the people in the village. And we know that our main character's father was killed during this, and many others. So we're going to pick up on chapter 5. In my book, it's page 25. Not really sure what the page number is in some of yours, because we have three different editions of the book that have gone out. So whatever your page number is, look at chapter 5 and we'll start reading there. That night was the most terrible time in all the memory of Galahast. When the fateful day had dawned and the tribe numbered 42 men, counting those who were too old to fight. When the night came and the women had carried back to the village those who had died on the beach of Coral Cove, there remained only 15. And of these, 7 were old men. There was no woman who had not lost a father or a husband or a brother or a son. The storm lasted 2 days, and the third day we buried our dead on the south headland. The Aleuts who had fallen on the beach, we burned. For many days after that, the village was quiet. People went out only to gather food and came back to eat in silence. Some wished to leave and go in their canoes to an island called Santa Catalina, which lies far off to the east, but others said that there was little water on that island. And in the end, a council was held, and it was decided to stay at Galahast. The council had also chose a new chief to take my father's place. His name was Kemke. He was very old, but he had been a good man in his youth and a good hunter. The night he was chosen to be chief, he called everyone together, saying, "Most of those who snarled foul and found fish in the deep water and built canoes are gone. The women, who were never asked to do more than stay at home, cook food, and make clothing now, must take the place of the men and face the dangers which abound beyond the village. There will be grumbling in Galahast because of this, and there will be shirkers. They will be punished, for without the help of all must perish." Kemke portioned work for each one in the tribe, giving Ulape and me the task of gathering abalones. The shellfish grew on the rocks along the shore and was plentiful. We gathered them at low tide in baskets and carried them to the mesa, where we cut the dark red flesh from the shell and placed it on flat rocks to dry in the sun. Ramo had the task of keeping the abalones safe from the gulls, and especially the wild dogs. Dozens of our animals, which had left the village when their owners had died, joined the wild pack that roamed the island. They soon grew fierce as the wild ones and only came back to the village to steal food. Each day toward evening, Ulape and I helped Ramo put the abalones in baskets and carry them to the village for safekeeping. During this time, other women were gathering scarlet apples that grow on the cactus bushes that are called tunas. Fish were caught and many birds were netted. So hard did the women work that we really fared better than before when the hunting was done by the men. Life in the village should have been peaceful, but it was not. The men said that the women had taken the tasks that rightfully were theirs, and now that they had become hunters, the men looked down upon them. There was much trouble over this until Kemke decreed that the work would again be divided. Henceforth, the men would hunt and the women harvest. Since there was already ample food to last enough through the winter, it no longer mattered who hunted. But this was not the real reason why autumn and winter were unpeaceful at Galahast. Those who had died at the Coral Cove were still with us. Everywhere we went on the island or on the sea, whether we were fishing or eating or sitting by the fires at night, they were with us. We all remembered someone, and I remembered my father, so tall and strong and kind. A few years ago, my mother had died, and since then, Ulape and I had tried to do the task that she had done. Ulape even more than I, being older. Now that my father was gone, it was not easy to look after Ramo, who was always into some mischief. It was the same in the other houses at Galahast. But more than that, More than the burdens which had fallen upon us all, it was the memory of those who had gone that burdened our hearts. After food had been stored in autumn and the baskets were full in every house, there was more time to think about them, so that a sort of sickness came over the village and people sat and did not speak, nor ever laughed. In the spring, Kemke called the tribe together. He'd been thinking, he said, during the winter, and had decided that he would take a canoe and go east to a country which was there, which he had once been to when he was a boy. It lay many days across the sea, but he would go there and make a place for us. He would go alone because he could not spare one of our men for the voyage, and he would return. The day that Kemke left was fair. We all went to the cove and watched him launch the big canoe. It held 2 baskets of water and enough tuna and dried abalone to last many days. We watched while Kemke paddled through the narrow opening in the rocks, and slowly he went through the kelp beds and into the sea. And there he waved to us and we waved back. The rising sun made a silver trail across the water, and along this trail he disappeared into the east. The rest of the day we talked about the journey. Would Kemke ever reach this far country about which nothing was known? Would he ever come back before the winter was over, or never? That night we sat around the fire and talked while the wind blew and the waves crashed against the shore. This is chapter 6. In my book, it's page 30. After Kemke had gone 1 moon, we began to watch for his return. Every day, someone went to the cliff to scan the sea. And even on stormy days, we went, and on days when the fog shrouded the island. During the day, there was always a watcher on the cliff, and each night we sat around our fires and we wondered if the next sun would bring him home. But spring came and left, and the sea was empty. Kemke did not return. There were a few storms that winter, and rain was light and ended early. This meant that we would need to be careful of water. In the old days, the springs sometimes ran low and no one worried, but now everything seemed to cause alarm. Many were afraid that we would die of thirst. There were other things more important to ponder, said Matasat, who had taken Kemke's place. Matasat meant the Aleuts, for it was now the time of year when they had come before. Watchers on the cliff began to look for the red sails, and a meeting was held to plan what to do if the Aleuts came. We lacked the men to keep them from landing or to save our lives if they attacked us, which we were certain they would. Plans were therefore made to flee as soon as their ship was sighted. Food and water were stored in canoes, and these were hidden in the rocks at the south end of the island. The cliffs were steep here and very high, but we wove a stout rope of bull kelp and fastened it to the rocks on the top of the cliff so that it hung to the water. As soon as the Aleut ship was sighted, we would all go to the cliff and let ourselves down one at a time, and we would then leave in our canoes for the island of Santa Catalina. Although the entrance to the Coral Cove was too narrow for a ship to pass through safely at night, men were sent there to watch the cove from dusk to dawn, besides those who watched during the day. Shortly afterwards, on a night of fine moon, one of the men came running back to the village. Everyone was asleep, but his cries quickly awakened us. "The Aleuts," he shouted, "the Aleuts!" It was the news we had expected. We were prepared for it, yet there was much fear in the village of Galahast. Massasap strode from hut to hut, telling everyone to be calm and not to lose time packing things that would not be needed. I took my shirt of yucca fiber, however, for I had spent many days making it and it was very pretty, and also my otter cape. Quietly, we filed out of the village along the trail that led toward the place where our canoes were hidden. The moon was growing pale, and there was a faint light in the east, but a strong wind began to blow. We had gone no farther than half a league when we were overtaken by the man who had given the warning. He spoke to Massasep, and we all gathered around to listen to him. "I went back to the cove after I gave the alarm," he said. "When I got there, I could see the ship clearly. It is beyond the rocks that guard the harbor. It is a smaller ship than the one which belonged to the Aleuts. The sails are white instead of red." "Could you see anyone?" Massasep asked. "No, it is not the same ship which was here last spring." "No." Massasep was silent, pondering the news, and then he told us to go to where the canoes were and wait for him, for he was going back. It was light now, and we went quickly over the dunes to the edge of the cliff that stood there while the sun rose. The wind grew cold, but fearing that those on the ship would see the smoke, we did not start a fire, although we had meal to cook for breakfast. Instead, we ate a small quantity of dried abalone, and afterwards my brother Ramo climbed over the cliff. No one had been down to the rocks since the canoes were hidden, so we did not know whether they were still safe or not. While he was gone, we saw a man running across the dunes. It was Nanko, carrying a message from Massasoit. He was sweating in spite of the cold, and he stood trying to catch his breath. And we all waited, urging him to talk, but his face was happy, and we knew that he brought good news. Speak, everyone said in chorus. I have been running for more than a league, he said. I cannot talk. You are talking, someone said. Speak, Nanko, speak, cried many voices. Nanko was having fun with us. He threw out his chest and took a deep breath, and he looked around at the circle of faces as if he did not understand why everyone was staring at him. The ship, he said at last, saying the word slowly, does not belong to our enemies, the Aleuts. There are white men on this ship, and they have come from that place where Kimki went when he left our island. Has Kimki returned? An old man broke in. No, but it is he who saw the white men and told them to come. What do they look like? Ulape asked. Are there boys on the ship? Asked Ramo, who had come back with his mouth full of something. Everyone seemed to be talking at once. Nanko made his face stern, which was hard for him to do because his mouth had been cut in battle with the Aleuts, and ever since it had always seemed to smile. He held up his hand for silence. The ship has come for one reason, he said, to take us away from Galahast. To what place? I asked. It was good news that the ship did not belong to the Aleuts, but where would the white men take us? I do not know to what place, he said. Kemke knows, and he has asked the white men to take us there. Saying no more, Nanko turned back and we followed him. We were fearful of where we were going, yet we were happy too. This is chapter 7, page 35 in my book, but maybe not the same page number in yours, so just look for chapter 7. We took nothing with us when we thought we would have to flee, so there was much excitement as we packed our baskets. Nanko strode up and down outside the houses, urging us to hurry. The wind grows strong, he shouted. The ship will leave you. I filled 2 baskets with things I wished to take. 3 fine needles of whalebone, an awl for making holes, a good stone knife for scraping hides, 2 cooking pots, and a small box made from a shell with many earrings in it. Ulape had 2 boxes of earrings, for she was vainer than I, and when she put them into her basket, she drew a thin mark with blue clay across her nose and cheekbones. The mark meant that she was unmarried. The ship leaves, shouted Nanko. If it goes, Ulape shouted back, it will come again after the storm. My sister was in love with Nanko, but she laughed at him. Other men will come to the island, she said. They will be far more handsome and brave than those who leave. You are all women of such ugliness that they will be afraid and soon go away. The wind blew in fierce gusts as we left the village, stinging our faces with sand. Ramo hopped along far in front with one of our baskets, but before long he ran back to say that he had forgotten his fishing spear. Nanko was standing on the cliff motioning us to hurry, so I refused to let him go back for it. The ship was anchored outside the cove, and Nanko said that it could not come closer to the shore because of the high waves. They were beating against the rocks with the sound of thunder, and the shore, as far as I could see, was rimmed with foam. 2 boats were pulled up on the beach. Beside them stood 4 white men, and as we came down the trail, one of the men beckoned us to walk faster. He spoke to us in a language which we could not understand. The men of our tribe, except Nanko, Chief Nassasat, were already on the ship. My brother Ramo was there too, Nanko said. He had run on ahead after I had told him that he could not go back to the village for his spear. Nanko said that he had jumped into the first boat that left the cove. Massasat divided the women into 2 groups. Then the boats were pushed into the water, and while they bobbed about, we scrambled into them as best we could. The cove was partly sheltered from the wind, but as soon as we went through the passage between the rocks and into the sea, great waves struck us. There was much confusion. Spray flew. The white men shouted at each other. The boat pitched so wildly that in one breath you could see the ship, and in the next breath it had gone. Yet we came to it at last, and somehow we were able to climb onto the deck. The ship was large, many times the size of our biggest canoes. It had two small masts, and between them stood a young man with blue eyes and a black beard. He was the chieftain of the white men, for he began to shout orders which they quickly obeyed. Sails rose on the tall mast, and two of the men began to pull on the rope that held the anchor. I called to my brother, knowing that he was very curious and therefore would be in the way of the men who were working, and the wind drowned my voice, and he did not answer. The deck Sorry, my pages are stuck together. The deck was as crowded that it was hard to move, but I went from one end to the other calling his name. Still there was no answer, and no one had seen him. At last I found Nanko. I was overcome with fear. "Where is my brother?" I cried. He repeated what he had told me on the beach, but as he spoke, Ulape, who stood beside him, pointed toward the island. I looked out across the deck and the sea. There, running along the cliff, the fishing spear held over his head, was Ramo. The sails had filled, and the ship was now moving slowly away, and everyone was looking toward the cliff, even the white men. I ran to one of them and pointed, but he shook his head and turned from me. The ship began to move faster. Against my will, I screamed. Chief Massasep grasped my arm. "We cannot wait for Ramo," he said. "If we do, the ship will be driven onto the rocks." "We must," I shouted. "We must." "The ship will come back for him on another day," Massasep said. "He will be safe. There is food for him to eat and water to drink and places to sleep." "No," I cried. Massasep's face was like stone. He was not listening. I cried out once more, but my voice was lost in the howling wind. People gathered around me, saying again what Massasep had said, yet I was not comforted by their words. Ramo had disappeared from the cliff, and I knew that he was now running along the trail that led to the beach. The ship began to circle the kelp bed, and I thought surely that it was going to return to the shore. I held my breath waiting. Then slowly its directions changed. It pointed toward the east, and at that moment I walked across the deck, and though many hands tried to hold me back, flung myself into the sea. A wave passed over my head, and I went down and down until I thought I would never behold the day again. The ship was far away when I rose. Only the sails showed through the spray. I was still clutching the basket that held all of my things, but it was very heavy, and I realized that I could not swim with it in my arms. Letting it sink, I started off toward the shore. I could barely see the two rocks that guarded the entrance of the coral cove, but I was not fearful. Many times I had swum farther than this, although not in a storm. I kept thinking over and over as I swam how I would punish Ramo when I reached the shore. Yet when I felt the sand under my feet and I saw him standing at the edge of the waves holding his fishing spear and looking so forlorn, I forgot all those things that I had planned to do. I fell to my knees and put my arms around him. The ship had disappeared. "When will it come back?" Ramo asked. There were tears in his eyes. "Soon," I said. The only thing that made me angry was that my beautiful skirt of yucca fibers, which I had worked on so long and carefully, was ruined. And that's the end of the reading for today. So tomorrow we will pick up on chapter 8. Thank you for reading with me, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Get your face. Okay, we'll just be right here. You can come in here in a minute when you finish your food. finished recording,
Yeah.
and it just went to that screen, and I don't know how to get it off.
Oh, you're still recording.